Hey friends, when you test and monitor your websites end-to-end with Playwright, choosing the right locators is essential. In this video, we're going to look at user-first locators and how you can filter your locators to create tests that are less flaky and won't break as easily. Sounds good? Let's get to it. Let's look at this example page. It doesn't include much. It only has a headline, a button, and a status update box. And whenever I click this button, it is updating the status and it's throwing some confetti. So how could I test this? When I head over to my editor, we have here a filter spec.ts file that includes a test. Click product button. It already navigates to localhost. And here are the assertions that are checking that the status box and the confetti are working properly. But the question now is, how should we select this button? If you've used Playwright before, you might know that there is the page locator function. So to interact with elements on the page, you can always do await page, and now you use the locator function. And page is here a fixture that is isolated and available in every test case. And now we could get the button and we could click on it. And there's not much magic to it. So when I now run npx playwright test, we do have a succeeding test case. But we have to admit in this example here right now that this is a very, very bare bones website. So you probably want to drill down and make sure that you're reaching the right element. So when we now look at the HTML, we see that there's also a CTA class available. So what we could do potentially is we could drill down our selection here with this button.cta selector to only select the buttons with the class CTA. And when we now run the test, this also still works. But now we're relying on the implementation details of this website. Let me give you two examples. When we go into the HTML and maybe a developer will update this CTA class to call it primary, then our test cases will fail because our locator in Playwright won't match the right elements anymore. And also as another example, let's say that the click me here comes from a translation service and something in the application breaks so that we are shipping something like this. Our test in this case will still be passing, but we will kind of ship broken features to production. And this is why when you're heading to the Playwright docs, you will find that using page locator with CSS selectors or XPath is kind of discouraged right now. So what should you do instead? To avoid unstable tests that take implementation details into consideration and also ignore how the user perceives your website and application, Playwright these days provides a whole lot of built-in locators. So we have page getByRole, getByText, getByLabel, and all these built-in locators are taking the user into consideration. And in my experience, this approach often kicks off a conversation between testing and development. If you want to test something and you struggle to locate the right element with these locators, usually there's a problem with the application. If a button doesn't have the proper accessibility roles like button and is properly labeled, then that should be properly fixed. Or if you have a form that doesn't label its input fields, that is also something that is inaccessible. It reduces the click areas. It overall harms the user experience. So I really like that these user-first built-in locators with Playwright enforce good practices in web development. So let's have a look how we can use getByRole. Let's go back to our test case and change this locator call to use getByRole. And what we want to locate is something with the role button. And this now should have the accessible name. Let's have a look inside of the website again. It should have the accessible name click me. And if you're not familiar with these APIs, you might now ask, okay, how do I get this accessibility role and what is the accessible name? If you're in Chrome, you can always open your Chrome Developer DevTools and you can inspect an element. And here's a pro tip. When you go here to the bottom panel, there's an accessibility panel. And what we here now see is that this element, the button, has the role button and it has the accessible name click me. And here's now the catch. If you're using getByRole without an additional attribute, is case insensitive. And it's also only matching substrings. So when we now have a website like ours, we can look for the semantically action that a user might want to take. In this case, it is click. And Playwright figures out if this is the right element. So if we now consider our template again, if now this text changes to delete me, the test would start to fail. And I think this is just a nice, very user-first approach. If you really want to match the exact string values in your getByRole calls, what you always can do is you can call exec true. And this way, this now would also fail because the accessible name is not click, but it's rather click me. Let's remove the exec true again and check if we have a passing test case. I'm pretty sure we do. And let's make this example a little bit more realistic. Let's change the website that we're testing and bring in some additional elements here. We now have here 3 elements that are sold out. They're not throwing confetti and they're updating the status here with the text, nope, I'm sold out. And we have the 4th one, the available one, that is still drawing confetti and it's still drawing the message, I'm available and special. This is exactly what we're testing here. But the problem now is that when we run our test case, our getByRole locator is matching multiple elements and it's violating Playwright's strict mode. So Playwright is telling us, hey, this is actually resolving to 4 elements. Please do something about it. So what can we do? If your locator is matching multiple elements in your page, there are multiple ways that you can resolve the issue. One solution can be to access the right elements by their position in this collection of matching elements. So getByRole button with the accessible name click currently matches 4 elements. We can easily get the first one and click this one. Or we can get the 4th one in our example by calling nth3. This is 0 index, so it's 0, 1, 2, 3. And now when we run the test again, we should have again a succeeding test case. But if we consider this being an e-commerce store, the chances that products shuffle around in their position on the page is rather high. So for this example, this approach probably leads to unstable tests. What else can we do? In these situations, I usually take a step back and kind of look at the surroundings of the elements that I want to interact with and apply some filter magic. When we have a look at the page, we see that we are dealing with an unordered list here that includes several list items. And this headline here includes the string available, which then means that this button should provide the functionality that we're after. So let's put this into a Playwright selector. Let's comment this one out because I'm not planning to ship this one. Let's define a variable. Let's call it button. And here we will now start locating this button top down. First of all, getByRole will be our friend. And I'm not looking for the button initially. What I will look for is a list item. So when we go into the page again and inspect the list items, we see that these have the role list item, but currently they don't have an accessible name. How can that be helpful? When you're dealing with locators in Playwright, what you always can do is you can call filter on them. And filter comes with some magic that allows you to drill down into your selection. In this case, what I want to do is I want to call has text on this selection of several list items. And whenever there is text included in this selection that includes available, I want to get the button that is included in it. So let's do this. And the button again should have an accessible name, which includes click me. So now we have here a fairly complex selector compared to the other one. So what we're doing is we're getting all the list items, so 1, 2, 3, 4, and then we're checking if one of them includes the text available, which the 4th one does, and then we're getting the button to interact with it later. So all we're missing now is we have to do await button click, and if we're lucky, this now would work on the first try. Let's run npx playwright test, and as we see, we have a succeeding test case. So when it comes to choosing the right locators to come up with stable tests, very often I found that it is very helpful to take a step back and not only consider the element that you want to fill or click, but also consider its surroundings. So what's the best locator strategy for end-to-end testing and monitoring then? I think there's no silver bullet, but I try to take a step back from implementation details as much as possible. And that's why I think Playwright's push for user-first locators actually helps to make tests more stable, more maintainable, less flaky, but also kick off a conversation between the testers and the developers. And yes, every now and then I do think that using data test IDs are tremendously helpful to validate data that is maybe included in the page rather than doing all this filtering. So I also use data test IDs. How do you write your Playwright locators? If you have any questions or comments, drop them in the comments below. And remember, if you use Playwright for end-to-end testing, you might want to check out Checkly for end-to-end monitoring too. And with that, I will talk to you very, very soon again.